Hi friends, hope you are doing well. I'm Dr. Ganguly. Welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to talk about the B1 B2 visa, and this is a visa often known as the travel visa or the tourism visa. But you use this visa to come to the US whether you are coming for a technical conference, whether you're coming for business visit, or whether you are coming to visit some relatives or for tourism. So this is a visa which can be used in a variety of cases, and depending on the particular reason for which you are coming, they are going to give you the B1 or the B2 stamp in the visa. Now I'm going to discuss 5 or 6 issues regarding this visa because this visa is very important. It's used by a lot of students and scholars who want to come to the US for technical conferences. It's also used by various relatives of people, their parents and so on, to come to the US also. So there are a large number of people who applied for the B1 B2 visa, and there are many people out there, unscrupulous agents and so on, who say that they can help them in getting this B1 B2 visa, but actually they can't. There is only a variety of things you can do about this. So I'm going to tell you some of the things which you should keep in mind beforehand and how you can prepare for this visa interview over the long run. So let's begin. Now do remember that this visa is something which allows you to stay in the US for up to 6 months, but whatever time you do stay in the US will depend on what the officer at the port of entry allows you to do. So you need to figure this out from your I-94 form. Sometime it will be stamped on your passport, sometime it may be not, but in case it's not stamped, you have to go into the computer, you have to find your I-94 information from your passport details, and then you can figure out how long you can stay in the US. So this is something you need to keep in mind. Now do remember that for the B1 B2 or for many visas, they only require a very few forms and documents. So you have to fill the DS-160 form online. This is something you have to do on a computer, and after you have given all this information, this really is like your resume or curriculum vitae, wherever you have worked, what is your name, what is the name of your parents, relatives and so on, if you have any national identity number, all the companies you have worked in, your education, and all these details have to be given in the DS-160 form. Remember that when you go for the interview, they typically do not have time to see any document. So this is a difference between the US visa and the European Schengen visa. The Schengen visa requires a lot of documents such as your bank statements and so on, but in the case of B1 B2, you don't need any documents, you don't need no objection certificates and so on. Now what the officer has here is simply a small set of documents. He has access to the DS-160 which you have filled up. He can see your passport. From your passport he can figure out where you were born, what are the visas you have obtained, where you have traveled and so on, at least in the recent past. And he can also look at you and figure out many things from you. So instead of perusing a large amount of documents which may be true, may not be true, what they try to do is they try to ask you a few pointed questions, and from that they try to figure out whether your statements are correct, whether you are somebody who is a legitimate person or not. Now remember, the first thing they have to do in the visa system is that they have to figure out whether you are somebody who is going to stay in the US or not. So this is something known as the 214B criteria in the US immigration law, and this particularly says that all people who are coming on the non-immigrant visas, they are assumed to be potential immigrants, and it's up to them to make the case that they are not planning to immigrate to US. So now I'm going to embark on the 5 points. Now before that, I should mention to you that I am not an immigration lawyer. Whatever I'm saying is from my own personal experience and from information I have from the public domain. So if you need professional help, you should always consult with an immigration attorney. So the number one thing they try to look at is strong ties to your home country, and what they need to do here is they need to see as to what is the reason for you to come back. Now they are not going to bother about your bank statements, about your insurance policies, about your mutual funds and so on, but they may ask you a very pointed question that why are you going to come back, or what's your plan when you come back. So essentially you have to make a point. For example, if you have a regular job, if you are a student, if you are a professor, if you are a research scientist, you can simply say you are working in this particular place and you will come back and continue the work there. You are only going to the US for this conference, and if you are somebody else, maybe you are a retired person, you are visiting your son or daughter in the US, you can mention that you have your home there or you are living with your son or somebody like that in some city and you are visiting US and then you will come back after this particular period. So these are certain things you are going to tell them. They are going to look at your eye and make eye contact and try to figure out whether you are telling the truth. So it's very important not to be shifty eyed, to make sure you make eye contact. The body language is something they rely on a lot. Many of the US consulate officers are expert in body language and therefore they are going to be able to figure out whether you are telling the truth or not. So you need to be somebody who can make this case about your return to India, and this is really easy for you to make if you actually do plan to do so, because you will have many things lined up back in your home country. Now the second point has to do with precedence, and this is something which can help people, particularly people who are students and who are scholars, is that if your passport contains prior visas, and in this case this may not be something you have actually planned out to do, but you have traveled to any Schengen countries, you have traveled to Australia, you have traveled to UK, Japan, Canada, any other place, then it certainly seems that you are somebody who goes abroad and comes back, and this gives the officer some confidence about you as a person. Now in case you have an empty passport, of course the problem is more complex. They have to determine your intent, but that's not generally a problem. But of course any precedence you have in terms of various visits to foreign countries makes it easier for the officer to give you the visa. This is particularly very useful if you are somebody who has been in US and has returned to India. So if you have somebody who has been to the US on maybe the H1 visa or maybe the F1 visa and you return back to your home country, then that certainly looks very good on your passport, and in that case you have much lesser difficulty in terms of getting the B1, B2 visa. So always try to get visa in some of these countries I mentioned before, typically the developed countries such as the European Schengen area, Japan visa, and so on. Also make it a point to avoid visiting very controversial countries, because what happens is that just like visiting some place like Europe may be beneficial for you, visiting some country which is involved in various nefarious activities may be negative for you. So do keep this in mind. Now the third point, which is very important, is a well-filled DS-160 form, and this is the form you fill online, and this contains a whole bunch of questions which you need to fill very truthfully. So make sure that whatever you are filling in the DS-160 form are the things which you tell the officer themselves. So if you are going to US for a 12-day visit, then make sure that when he asks you a question, how long are you going to be there, you mention 12 days. And what they are going to do is they are going to skim through your DS-160 details, and they may just ask you some pointed questions here and there. So in case you have filled in 12 days here and you say 1 or 2 months, that doesn't come across very well, and that may be a ground to deny the visa. So everything which you have filled in the DS-160, you have to own it, even if you got somebody else to fill the form, because you are not familiar with computers and so on. Make sure that you have sat next to that person and figured out exactly what has gone into that form. So all the details about the different relatives you have in the US should not be hidden at any point here. So some people think that just because they have brothers, sisters, uncles, aren't in the US, they should not put it in because it may negatively impact their visa. What happens is that all these things can come out at any stage, and they can have very dire consequences for you down the road in terms of getting visa and so on. Now the next point is about the interview, and like I mentioned before, beside the DS-160, the next thing they have for you is the interview. And during the interview they are going to look at you, they are going to look at your passport, they are going to ask you a few pointed questions. So one of the things you should do is you should go with confidence, you should dress your part. So if you are a student, you should dress like a student. If you are a professor, you should dress like a professor. If you are a parent of somebody, an elderly person, then you can dress that particular role. Make sure that you are comfortable in whatever dress you have, that you can speak with confidence and have good body language. You don't want to wear a tight 3-piece suit and go if you are not somebody who is familiar with this setting. Also, if maybe you are a student, you need not wear a suit and go, because That's not the typical dress for students. Students can go wearing jeans, t-shirt and so on. That's quite acceptable as far as students are concerned. Now, an important thing is to talk slowly during the interview. Make sure you listen to the question properly and then you frame your reply accordingly. Now, do remember that they are going to ask you very pointed questions. So they may ask you direct question, for example, that I don't think you will come back. And so you need to give a very proper response as to what is the reason you are going to come back. Or they may ask you where are the places you are going to be in the US, or what are the places you are going to visit. So you need to have a clear list of places. For example, if you are going to the Niagara Falls or you are visiting the Yellowstone National Park, you should lay all these things out. And also remember that if you are staying in any hotel, if you are staying with any relative, you should clearly mention that particular location and they should match with whatever you have filled in your DS-160 form. You should also know which airline you are flying by, what are you going to do after you land, and when exactly are you planning to come back to your home country, and after you are coming back to your home country, what exactly are you going to do. Now, they do not often require documentation, but they may ask you probing question as to how did you get leave from your university, have you taken sabbatical leave or so on. Maybe they may even ask you for a document. So in that case, you have to show some document that you have obtained the leave. So all these things are possible. Most of the time they do not ask for documents. They simply try to figure out from your face and body language that you are telling the truth, and they move on. Because do remember that whatever you say in the embassy interview, that is something which you are supposed to say the truth, and if you are lying there, then there may be negative consequences later if things are found out. So this was about the interview part. Now the next issue has to do with the host. So in many situations, specifically if you are somebody who is a parent and you are going to visit your children in the US, then what happens is that you should clearly identify that your host is your son or daughter, and you should clearly mention what are the things you are going to do there. Now sometimes people think that they can say all kind of random things, that I'm going to help them in cooking, I'm going to help them bringing up a baby or something like that, but these are all inappropriate things to say. What you need to say is that you are going to provide company to people, you want to visit your grandchildren, maybe you want to visit some nearby places and so on. Remember that they don't want you to come and substitute for typical US labor which could be used to perform some of these functions. So do keep that in mind, that during these visas you're not allowed to work in the US. So anything which seems like you are substituting for some employment is not construed out to be very well. For example, if your daughter is running some business where she's making some food or she's doing some catering, it's not appropriate to say that you are going to go there and help her out in some of these tasks, because that certainly qualifies as a case where you should not be given the visa. Finally, I should say the last point is about social media, and whenever you are posting in social media, do remember that you have to be very appropriate and very proper as far as the US government is concerned and different political issues are concerned. So nowadays, because of AI, it's very easy to search through the profile of somebody as to what they have been posting on the internet and so on, and some of these issues can have negative consequences for you. So this is especially the case with some of the students who may have ideologies or viewpoints which are pretty far out from the middle spectrum, and in that case whatever they say may come back to haunt them down the road. So this was my relative deep dive into how to get the B1 B2 visa. If you are lucky and if you have good background, you can get this visa for 10 years. I was able to get this visa twice for 10 years each, and it greatly helped in my career as far as coming to US and visiting various conferences were concerned. It also brings down the cost of coming to US, because you do not have to then go for the visa every time. You get the visa once and then you can use it repeatedly. So I hope this video will help you, and I will see you in a video sometime soon. See you then.